because all the time you had a feeling and the assurance that you were doing something for the country.
My first job was carpenter's laborer. Most of us was absolutely no conversation with any English. At that stage we learned first abusive words and swearing words. We didn't know. If they swore at us, we just smiled and carry on with the job.
I was a miner in Italy, but I couldn't tell them that they just pick you up as labor, see, so they just give you a pick and shovel. So when one miner went to the toilet, I took his jackhammer and started working. And when he came back and he showed me, he went straight up in the office. And he said, I find a new miner. He said, that's the one down there on the job. So they come down and pick me up and put me in the tunnel.
One day, a lady came to me, Laura Brown, who worked for the commissioner, and she asked me, would I be able to draw up an advertisement, a half-page advertisement for the Truth, because they didn't have anybody to do it at the time. And she knew that I had studied graphic design in Berlin. So being fairly bored on the weekends, I spent my whole weekend drawing it and gave it to her on Monday morning. Well, I think the following day already, I was called on the double to Sir William's office, Sir William Hudson. And when he saw me, he looked me straight in the face and said, have you done this? And I said, yes, Sir William. And he said, how come you can do things like that? Have you got your matriculation? I said, yes, of course I have my matriculation. I studied graphic design. And after some severe pause, he looked at me and said, you are wasted as a chainman. And then he picked up the phone and rang the survey office and said, well, we'll transfer Mr. Zimmer to the public relations area, and he will now be classified as draftsman.
You see this tree? This is a landmark where people used to go off to Tengtengara Dam, and this was my first time going to Cabramara. I've never forgotten this side. I couldn't believe how many people got off the bus to look for work. I had a job arranged to work in the T2 power station, but many people didn't have a work, and you just had to queue up every day and well, ask for a job. So here we are in the middle of the bush. This is the old campsite from called Section Creek. Most people from here used to work at T2, at the power station, at the tunnels. But Section Creek was such a small camp, it had to be built on 2 levels. And the big steps used to go up here. The winter wasn't very comfortable up here. It was very cold and very isolated. And if you wanted to run away, you couldn't even run away.
My mother was a doctor in the Snowy Mountain Scheme. Being born in Vladivostok, living in Shanghai, she was multilingual. She was only 5 foot tall. She was a little pocket dynamo. Being a doctor, she had a feeling for what was happening in the community. At some time during the time in Cabramara, she could feel tension in the camp, and she went and spoke to the local policeman that said, look, I think there's potential problems here, and I think we need to look at doing something. And the guy said, well, what do you think we need to do? And Mum's suggestion was to see if we could obtain the services of a couple of the ladies from Cooma. Everything then quietened down. It was great. Dad was in charge of diamond drilling in the Snowy. So they had these various diamond drilling locations that they had to go to. And Dad would take us out if he was going out in the bush somewhere. He'd take us out in the Land Rover. We'd get bogged all the way. We'd be winching ourselves out all the way, and you'd inevitably get home late in the day, absolutely exhausted. I remember on a couple of trips seeing lots of wombats, you know, lots of kangaroos. The wildlife, you know, there was fantastic.
My time in the bush was very recuperative. I grew up in an orphanage. My mother died early. I hardly knew my father. I had no family, as it were. I was always insecure. And here, for the first time in Australia, I could stand on my own feet. I used to do a bit of drawing. I had paper with me. I had pencils and ink with me. And I did a few watercolors. When I came to Australia, gum tree was totally alien. And later on, I discovered that it is the most beautiful tree on earth in all its different shapes and forms.
«11 человек, и меня послали строить гидрографическую станцию. Шло дело помалу. Все, что надо было ходить ребятам и тащить на плечах. Сказал, что я знаю подрывную работу. В следующий раз я попросил, чтобы привезли ящик и больше, и детонаторов. То Стэн Боднарский, мой знакомый, тоже, он был «Оторви голова», а он имел 4x4. Я говорю: «Стэн, попробуй». И он поехал до самого ручья. And Stan was taking, please, well, he was carrying detonators and a box of gelignite. If it fell down anywhere, it will blow everything to smithereens. That's the way we worked on Slough. We used to take risk, and a lot of risk.
We're going to build this dam, and of course to build a dam we need to have the dry foundations, and to do that we have to build a cofferdam to stop the river there, to divert it away from the dam foundations. And I wanted concreting done, you see, and of course we had to have approval of the concrete, and we had to approval of build a dam, and approval for this and approval for that, you know. So I said, I can't sit and wait for this and run. So I just went ahead. And Mr. Blake had his letter about that the concrete wasn't approved. So before we had finished in 1955, he looked at his files and he said, you must take it away because it wasn't approved concrete. So he said to him that the modern way of doing things nowadays, been done for years in Norway, I said, was that we just leave them in the dam. Eventually got them talked into to keep it, and the cofferdam is there.
It wasn't always very pleasant, not so much dust, but noise.